Thank you for listening to The Real Agenda, the podcast for political change. And a special welcome to the first episode of our new edition, which we're calling the Weekly Wake Up, addressing the events of the week and your chance to get a quick update. I'm joined by my co-presenter, Satya.
Hello, Tom.
So how are we doing this week?
Yeah, very good, actually.
So then tell us about
Well,
it.
first of all, Tom, I'm going to do a little interview with you.
Oh, you are indeed.
I am.
Well, that's very nice. I'm normally used to doing the interviews myself, but thank you very much. I look forward to that.
Yeah, then we're going to do some news items and just bring everybody up to date with what's going on around this very issue of the real agenda.
And then we might just finish up a bit with some events.
Yes, Tom, I thought it'd be really interesting for everyone to just hear from you what the real agenda is all about and why did you set this up?
The Real Agenda podcast had a weekly episode for the last 6 months. We started in October. And the reason for calling it The Real Agenda is that we wanted to focus on fixing the fundamental problems of our time. And that's primarily the extreme economic inequality and the unnecessary financial hardship suffered by millions of people every day, which have just not been addressed. And didn't really want to sit around just talking about them more, but actually trying to find some answers. So those that have listened to the show over the last 6 months will see that we've talked to some very interesting people who do have some of the answers and can also give you some of the background. And I think the idea then is that this podcast can help to sort of inform and inspire people to get involved.
Tom, I know that you've been very busy doing lots and lots of things. You're really passionate about this whole issue. Where does your drive and your passion come from?
Yeah, that's always interesting because when it applies to you, you think, well, surely that's just what you do. And then you think, well, what's happened back in your life that makes you so concerned to want to make a difference? I was involved in politics early on. I was a full-time student leader and I stood for election for local councils on a couple of occasions. But it's this feeling of the injustice and the unfairness. Interestingly enough, when I was at school, I must have been like 14, 15, we produced a school newspaper which we actually did call Equality. So I think maybe from then...
So you've been doing it for a long time then?
I've always been interested in this. Only really been able to get back into it in the last few years. I did write a book that came out 3 years ago called From Here to Prosperity, which was my take on how we could resolve inequality. And to me, there are certain things, and I came up with 5 policies that would really make a difference to the extreme economic inequality and would relieve hardship that's suffered by millions. So it built on from there.
One of the things that at the Real Agenda we want to do is make real change. People cannot do this alone. It needs everybody to be working at this and to be involved. How do you think people can get involved with this?
Well, I think one of the things here is that we've got so many people who are just frustrated about the political system and want to do something about it. And there's so many people doing really good things in communities, helping others, supporting those less well off, whether it's also in mental health and good charity work, and even those that are working full-time or part-time. A lot of people that I talk to, they want to make a difference. Even politicians, they want to make a difference. I think some of them have lost their way, got socialised into a system that they're not very effective anymore. So I think the rest of us, we can do a lot. Obviously, it starts with voting, and that is the basic right. But we can get involved in our communities. There are a number of voluntary organisations and other community organisations that are always looking for volunteers to help out. I think we can be talking to our friends and neighbours about these issues and what we can do. Not moaning. Well, I'll allow moan occasionally, but not attacking. And I think what we've got into in recent years is that we're attacking each other. I'm right, you're wrong. My tribe's right, your tribe's wrong. We need to get over that. We need to say, actually, it's all of us. We elected the government. We therefore need to change it. We need to do things, or we can do things collectively to change that. And if we talk about it more and we get involved in discussions and we help out in our local communities, or we give our time in any way. Now, some people haven't got the time to do that, so at least they could just talk to people when they've got a chance. So I think there's a number of ways.
So really, if you want to get involved, look around you, get involved in your local communities, listen to the Real Agenda, because we can give you some ideas in terms of how you can get involved and what you can do. Even the smallest things make a big, big difference.
I think the fundamental thing is, and this is particularly a message to younger people, that we can actually change things if we want to. We can actually do it, and there are answers. And one of the things these things have not been sorted out before is because there's not the political will and all the political courage. Compassion and courage are essential elements, and if we can help our politicians and help our representatives on that course, then that would be good.
I'm really interested to know. I know you've been very, very busy. What have you been up to?
Yes, well, indeed, it has been busy. I mean, this is now become a full-time job. There's been a number of things in the last week or so that have been involved with. One of those was an event organised by Compass, a campaign for a good society. They had an event on Saturday called Leaving the 20th Century, and it was a day of new politics to shape a better future. So there was lots of interesting discussions there, and speakers like Lisa Nandy MP and Clive Lewis MP, who both have agreed to come on the Real Agenda, so they'll be up soon.
Oh, that's great.
Actually, on the Sunday, there was an event called Podcast Live, which was a whole day of different political podcasts. There was the Romaniacs there, which is, I think, one of the most popular political podcasts that's going out. And the last episode that went out on the Real Agenda, we actually talked to Naomi Smith, who's one of the co-hosts on the Romaniacs. There was also the New European podcast, which featured Alistair Campbell, who's a regular on that, and he likes to finish off by playing his bagpipe. But I had a good chat with the hosts there, and they've invited me to be on a show. I went to a talk on social housing, and where they were talking about how bad things have got and what we could be doing. There's more. Compassion in politics. I really think this is an interesting movement. We spoke to Jennifer Nadell, the co-founder, in episode 22 of The Real Agenda, and I've had further conversations with them about collaborating and seeing how we can work together to bring more compassion in politics. I also went to an event at LSE, which are called Brexit and the End of Empire. Inequality, Brexit and the End of Empire, where the main speaker, Professor Danny Dorling, who's also been on here, we interviewed him a month or two back. And so Danny had some great data there, and he's got a new book out, which I've got a signed copy of here. And that was organised by the Atlantic Fellows, which is one of the programmes at the LSE. Brings together people from all over the world who've been campaigning on inequality issues.
And if you want to get involved, the best thing is listen to the show, but also look around you and be aware of what is out there. And please go and get involved and have your voice heard.
Well, it can often be difficult to keep up with the news, even though so much of it now is so easily accessible and very quickly on our phones. But what is often not there is the news about the urgent issues of our time, the human hardship, as well as the acts of human kindness and compassion, and the tremendous work done by so many people to make life better for others. So here, what we were looking to do is to just bring you some of the stories of coming out in recent weeks. So welcome to the Real Agenda News to Know Bulletin. And first up, Satya, you got a story about homelessness.
Yes, so I was reading an article in The Guardian recently about the Homelessness Reduction Act, which has now been in operation for 12 months. And just really looking at where that's going, it was first set up, actually pioneered by Southwark Council in South London. And now that's become the government's new flagship act on homelessness. And not many of us have heard about it. And what they're saying is that actually, although homelessness has gone up within the borough, the increase hasn't been as steep as they had thought it would be, which is good news. And at the same time, there's been a 50% increase in the number of people the council has helped to stay in their homes. I suppose the problems that the council has is that what they can't tackle through this are some of the key causes of homelessness in the first place.
Okay, thanks, Satya. And also, if you want to learn more about the terrible state of homelessness in our country and how to fix it, then you can listen to episode 21 of The Real Agenda, where we spoke with Matt Downey from the organisation Crisis, the homelessness charity, who've got a very clear plan. There's also some positive news. I'm fortunate to work with an organisation called Taxpayers Against Poverty, which is founded by the Reverend Paul Nicholson. There's been some progress in Haringey in North London, where the council has decided not to chase after the 3,000 hard-pressed families families who will no longer need to pay council tax, which they cannot afford, and the results in more ever increasing debt. So you can hear the Reverend Paul actually on episode 1 of The Real Agenda. One of the things with Taxpayers Against Poverty is that they also propose the abolition of council tax and replacement with a tax on land values, meaning that landowners, not tenants, will pay. And previously in Haringey, the council had actually spent thousands of pounds on taking council taxpayers to court, which only caused further hardship. Over to you, Satya.
So I was looking at this report from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation on UK poverty, and it says that child poverty has been rising since 2012. 4.1 million children live in poverty, and that's is a rise of over 500,000 in the last 5 years. 4 million workers live in poverty, and that's another 500,000 rise in the last 5 years. In-work poverty has been rising even faster than employment, and that's driven almost entirely by increasing poverty amongst working parents. Joseph Rowntree Foundation have a 5-point plan in which they have saying how they would solve poverty, or how we could solve poverty in the UK. The 5-point plan looks at, they want a boost in income and a reduction in costs. They want to deliver an effective benefit system, improve education standards and raise skills for all, strengthen families and communities, and promote long-term economic growth which would benefit everyone. What the report really emphasises is that if we could, as a country, get a consensus on all of these things and really fight for it, we can make this happen. And I think that's a great thing.
And in fact, we did speak to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation in episode 10, where Claire Ainsley gave an excellent description of what we needed to do and how we could how things could be sorted out. Just as a follow-up to what you've just been talking about, the government's, on the 28th of March, the government's below-average income data showed a considerable increase in the proportion of children in poverty who have a parent at work, which is sort of similar stuff, but an update on it. And in fact, it was Campbell Rodd, who's the CEO of Joseph Rowntree Foundation, reiterated the point that poverty is a scar on our nation's conscience, with more working families struggling to make ends meet. 4.1 million children are now locked in poverty. Nearly 3/4 have a parent in work, the highest rate on record. And he said it's unacceptable. Despite record levels of employment, millions of people are finding it hard to achieve a decent life. And families are looking to the government to immediately address problems of low pay, high rates, and a weakened social security system.
And I think, I like this idea of if we as a country want this, we can get a consensus around it. And actually, through our voting, through the way that we campaign, through the way that we actually talk to our local MPs, that we can make a difference.
Absolutely, and we must keep stressing that. It is up to us to bring change. And the next news item I just wanted to mention, on a slightly different area, was regarding tax. And while the Brexit debacle rolls on, campaigning for a fair tax system also keeps going. And in the last couple of weeks, John Christensen of the UK-based Tax Justice Network spoke at an event at the European Parliament organised by the European Free Alliance of the Greens on Brexit and the future of on Brexit and the future of tax havens. John spoke on the impact of Brexit on tax evasion and money laundering, and offering up some important recommendations how the European Union could move forward in its treatment of the UK, its satellite havens, and the City of London. As many, and this is me adding this point, I think as many realise that the UK and its dependencies represent the biggest tax haven in the world, and means that billions of pounds are lost to the British Treasury and us, the taxpayers, as a result of the action by wealthy individuals and companies, meaning we all have to pay more for our public services. And if you want to get more on tax justice, do listen to the Taxcast. It's a monthly podcast from the Tax Justice Network. And in fact, we actually talked to Robert Palmer, who's the Executive Director of Tax Justice UK, which is the UK arm of Tax Justice Network, and that was in episode 3 of The Real Agenda, so there's more information there. And I think I've got the next news item as well, haven't I?
Yes, you
the
have,
final
Tom.
one, but it seems that Brits now want a strong leader who's willing to break rules to push through wide-reaching reforms to the political system. And this is according to a poll by the Hansard Society. So they say that 3 years of Brexit turmoil, voters' confidence in politics at a 15-year low. I would have thought it was lower than that. I think it was like the last 100 years. But anyway, half of voters would back a strong rule-breaking leader, while 72% of the 2,000 people canvassed said that Westminster needs quite a lot or a great deal of improvement. Just 25% expressed confidence in the UK's current leader. So our comment here is that the true leader we want will display compassion and courage and have a very clear reform agenda. Now, you could find out more. Once again, there's a lot of this stuff's been on the Real Agenda. So here you go. We discussed the mood of the nation with Deborah Mattison from the research and polling company Britain Thinks in episode 24 of the Real Agenda.
And I just believe, Tom, that compassion is one of the greatest strengths that we can have as a country. We had it and we can have it again.
Indeed, that's the case, and I'm sure that will be a recurring theme of... Before we go, we're just going to look at some of the events that are going on. Now, most of these are in London because that's actually where we're both based at the moment. But if you've got any events anywhere else in the country or you'd like to be included in future shows, just let us know. So, what's coming up, Satya?
Well, the first one I've got, Tom, is on the evening of 30th of April, and it's called The Class Ceiling, an in conversation on social mobility, and that's run by the Centre for Progressive Policy in London, and I think people find that quite interesting.
Okay, and coming up on the 1st of May, there's a seminar at Portcullis House, which is in Westminster. It's the MP's offices there in the Attlee Suite, and it's called Social Death, the Impact of Austerity and Poverty. And the purpose of this seminar is to place on record well-sourced and tragic impacts of austerity and poverty, and it's organised by the Taxpayers Against Poverty. The chair of that is Debbie Abrahams MP, and she's also chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Committee on Health in All Policies. The speakers include Professor Danny Dorlin from Oxford University, Dr. Faiza Shaheen from CLASS, Dr. Chris Grover from Lancaster University, and Professor David Taylor Robinson from Liverpool University, who will all be giving data and information on the terrible effects of austerity and what needs to happen next.
So, Tom, I've got one on June the 7th, and it's philosophers A.C. Grayling and Peter Singer, who join the co-founder of Compassion in Politics, Jennifer Nadal. And Jennifer is someone that we heard on The Real Agenda in episode 22. And they're going to be discussing why we need a new political programme built around compassion. And boy, do we need compassion in our politics.
So that just about wraps up our weekly wrap-up. Next time, we'll give you more specific information on the organisations where you could get involved and where you can help to bring change. The links to the groups and events mentioned can be found on our website. That's realagendaradio.org, and you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsors, the Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies, and you can find out why at reversemediagroup.com. One thing's certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as a more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's The Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess.
And I'm Satya Kartara.
Thank you for listening, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.